Okay, hello, welcome to the second tutorial on having a look at feelings and impressions. We're going to try and apply those ideas to a closed passage. We're going to do it paragraph by paragraph because I can't fit it all on one screen. And that's a good way of doing this application anyway, is to do it paragraph by paragraph. Okay, what we'll do first of all is think about the questions. The questions are, what are your impressions of Emma's father? And then the second part of the question will be, what are your feelings about Emma's father? So we're looking at both impressions and feelings here. So as it is about the character Emma's father, what we want to do first of all is go through the prose and just highlight all the parts that are relevant to this question. So if we just read through first of all and pick out those parts and highlight them. The evening of the concert, Emma's father left Uncle Lee in charge of the pub. Okay, so that's her father there, and obviously he works in a pub. Before they took the bus to Victoria Concert, her father had already been working, for a couple of hours and reeked of cigarettes, his and other people's. Her father presented the ticket to the usher, then handed the stub to Emma. "I'll be waiting outside later. Now enjoy yourself," he instructed. The cost of the concert by the world-famous cellist had already been subsidised by the National Arts Council and the main sponsor, a local bank, but tickets were still pricey enough that Emma's father had only been able to afford one, and only in the circle at that, though he had made sure that the seat was as central as possible. Anyway, he did not really know what classical music was, and had no burning desire to find out. He had never heard of the world-famous cellist, whose large beaming visage fluttered from the hall's neoclassical facade until Emma had shown him the full-page advertisement in the Straits Times a month ago. Okay, so we've highlighted a few things there, and this is a good example of what I want you to get used to doing, which is to really, use your pens and your highlighters and highlight and annotate, the prose that you're looking at. And then what we can do is perhaps think about what some of these things. Okay, he'd already been working for a couple of hours, so, again, impressions are what we can infer from what the author is showing us. So maybe he's hard-working. He's only bought one ticket, but he wants his daughter to enjoy herself. Tickets were still priced enough. Her father had only been able to afford one. What does that tell us? That tells us that they're a low-income family. They don't have a lot of money. But he made sure the seat was as central as possible. What can you infer from that? That he wants the best for his daughter. That he's trying to do his best for her. He cares about her. He didn't really know what classical music was like. Okay, that may tell us that he's not that well educated if he has no knowledge of classical music. He had never even heard of the world-famous cellist. Does that tell us that he doesn't read a lot, or he's not worldly wise in culture and arts and things like that? Maybe that's not what he's interested in. Okay, so those are the first two paragraphs, and already we've pulled out a few things from those. Let's go on and have a look at the next paragraphs. So this is the second paragraphs, and we can carry on and do the same thing. He had been a little surprised at his 11-year-old daughter's interest in classical music coming seemingly out of nowhere. A widower, so that tells us that he's a widower, with the attendant anxieties on how to mother a daughter. So it shows us that he's anxious, and he has to be a mother as well as a father. He vaguely worried. Okay, that's an interesting point to note. He vaguely worried that he was not paying enough attention to her, maybe because he was working too hard. But in fact, Emma herself would not have been able to explain what had drawn her to the photo of the cellist in the concert advertisement as she leafed through the paper looking for articles for a social studies assignment. What Emma's father did know was that appreciating classical music, like having an English first name, was part of being educated. So he did know that being educated was something important and something he strongly desired for his child. Like most parents, they want their children to do better than themselves, so he wants his daughter to be educated. Hence he had bought her a ticket and kept it in the safest place he knew, the strong box in which he kept petty cash for the pub. That tells us the importance of the ticket and how important it is for him to let his daughter go to the concert. The smell of dollars, coins and the oil of anonymous hands wafted from the ticket. Emma clutched as she joined the crowd ascending the carpeted stairs. So again, there's a few points that we can pull out of those two paragraphs. Let's carry on with the third. Okay, in the next two paragraphs, we can see that these are mainly to do with Emma, so we're not going to have to highlight much here. Let's just read through quickly. She thought being allowed into this concert hall was in itself already a magnificent experience. As she matched the number on her ticket to the number on her seat, she gazed down at the crowds milling below and thought she had never been in such a grand and antique place, with its chandeliers and plush seats, its air-conditioned wintry chill, its olfactory swirl of paint, dust, wood and perfume. Later in life, Emma would not remember much about the program performed during her first concert, though she gave a voluble account to her father on the bus ride home. So that's just one mention of her father there on the bus ride home. And she kept the concert booklet for years until it was tossed out during the Chinese New Year spring cleaning operation. But she would remember craning her neck to gaze down into the abyss of the cellist, feeling the distance between herself up above in her numbered seat and him down below at the centre of the stage, separated only by air with specks of dust that danced like firelines in the spotlight. So not much there on the father, so that means we can just move on to the next ones. Okay, in the next paragraphs, we can read through those. His tiny figure appeared hallowed, even pulsing as she squinted at him through the plastic framed glasses. The notes that reached her ears were loud and pure and resonated through her entire being, as if she were the hollow body of the cello itself, filling her with a swollen longing for a world she had never seen. Her request to take cello lessons was initially met with incredulity, so we can just like that, so met with incredulity by her father, then anxiety, as he berated himself for not having the money to buy her an instrument, if he knew where to get one in the first place. So again, this gives us the idea that money is very tight. They're not a wealthy family, but he wishes that he could give his daughter what she wants. But luck sometimes visits even those who have gotten used to coping without it. A wealthy Norwegian shipping executive who was a regular at the pub heard of Emma's aspiration and, recalling his own satisfying boyish romance with the instrument, bought her a student cello made in China but well constructed. Okay, and again, there's another reference here to them getting used to coping without it. Coping without money, that is, and without all the things that it can buy. Okay, so a few things that we can pull out of the paragraph there, and let's go on to the last one. And then the last part of the prose is as follows. It was then only a matter of a bit more scrimping on her father's part. So scrimping on her father's part, including a short-lived attempt to quit smoking, to hire a teacher to come by the flat Wednesday evenings to give Emma lessons, held in the living dining area, as that was the only room with enough space for both the cello and the teacher. So again, another reference to the difficulty of their lives. But also it tells us her father's love and caring for his daughter, that he wants her to have a teacher. So he goes out of his way to try and make that happen. And then the last paragraph is mainly about Emma, so not really related to the father. Okay, so what we're going to do is then just think about what we can pull out from that prose to do with answering the question. So let's come back and have a new screen for that. Okay, so on this screen I've just listed some of the points that we can pull out from the prose, from the highlights that we've done. To answer the question first, what impressions do we get of the of Emma's father? Okay, the first thing, that he seems to be uneducated. And the examples that you could pick for that are that he didn't know what classical music was, he'd never heard of the world-famous cellist, so that suggests that he doesn't have that level of education or general knowledge about culture and arts. We can say that we get the impression that he's caring and loving, and the examples that you would pick out for that is that he does everything that he can for Emma. He's trying his best to satisfy her quest for music. He paid for the concert ticket, even though money is very tight. There's probably a couple of other examples that you can throw in there as well. We get the idea that he is a responsible parent. He takes Emma on the bus, he waits for her, he takes her back home. He wants the best for his daughter. We can say we get the impression that he's selfless. He's working hard, he's scrimping money, and he's saving up, even quit smoking, so that he can afford to hire a music teacher for Emma. So those are examples of him being selfless. And I think probably you can say there's a little pride there as well. You get the impression that he's proud from the way he listened to Emma talking on the bus home about what the concert was like. So those are just some examples of what we can infer from what we've highlighted in the prose. And there's quite a few points there backed up by the examples. In terms of what feelings we may have for him, okay, slightly different point of view here. Okay, we can perhaps say that we have some pity for the father, and you ask yourself why? Why would we have pity? Because he's a widower, and he is raising Emma by himself, trying to be both father and mother, which is a tough thing, and he's trying to work, and he's uneducated, and he's doing his best to get by. Because of that, we probably have some empathy. Lower class people doing their best to get by in life, trying to make things better for their children. That's something to empathize with, and that in turn can lead us to admire. Why? Because he's doing so much for Emma, because he's sacrificing some of the things that he might want so that she can pursue her love of music. And from that admiration, maybe we can say that we also feel respect for him, because he's being the best father that he can be, to try and give his daughter the things that she wants, and to help her have a better education and a better life than he does. Okay, so there's just some quick examples there of feelings. So I hope this example of going through prose and pulling out impressions and feelings clarifies the differences between the two things. The impressions, what we can infer from what the author tells us about something or somebody, versus our feelings, what we feel for the character or the thing in the prose. Okay, thanks very much.